Betsy and Thomas here with the American Intelligence Media, decoding the tea drops. And we had some tweets, Thomas, from May 26th, towards the end of the day in the evening. And we thought I'd get to the microphone today to be able to review those. And wouldn't you know, our POTUS has dropped another 3 tweets. You know, does the man ever sleep?
I don't think so. He's the most indefatigable person I've ever seen.
Well, you know you're going to be called out for butchering that pronunciation.
Indefatigable? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so what we're going to do now, folks, as always, if you click on the box below, you'll see that you'll go right to an article where the tweets are, and you can follow along. And we're going to start with the one on May 26th at 2:28 p.m. With spies or, quote, informants, close quote, as the Democrats like to call them because it sounds less sinister, but it's not, all over my campaign, even from a very early date. Why didn't the crooked, highest levels of the FBI or, quote, justice, unquote, contact me to tell me of the phony Russian problem? Sorry I add a few dramatics, but it really is. Department of Justice, you have to be kidding. And the Federal Bureau of Investigation can't even investigate the crimes going on under their own roof. Okay, but what about this tweet, Thomas?
Okay, spies and informants. First off, they are spies if they're in one campaign spying on the other. And that's what most of these people were doing. They cannot possibly be called informants. Well, they were informants, but the one informant didn't know he was being an informant per se, and that was Carter Page. He was set up. And he was a spy. He was sent in a way. But he was, basically a useful idiot. And he was called that by the Russians. He was called that by the FBI. They had other names for him also. But anyway, he was an informant. So the difference between spy and informant is very interesting because when it was the election, those were kind of spies. But it was also a counterintelligence operation. So this was an attack against an opponent based on these Democrats. So we're going to keep hearing up here in the other tweets, these Democrats, these 13 angry Democrats are the current ones, but there's a whole lot of angry Democrats. And then as he says, as the Democrats like to call them, the spies and informants. Now, that's because Clapper came out and said, oh, no, we were doing that. Oh, sure, we were doing that. We were helping Trump. We were making sure that he wasn't being manipulated by the Russians. But we didn't tell him, as Trump points out here. Then why didn't they tell him? Now, the things they didn't tell him was Carter Page was sent in by the FBI. Felix Sater was sent in by the FBI. Franklin Foer was an FBI informant. That the entire media, basically, especially the ones who were being sued, were agents of the FBI, all working through Fusion GPS, all working for the Democratic National Committee. That would be Podesta and Hillary and Obama. And so we're going to get up here in a minute to the fact that, again, he keeps pointing back to Obama because this is all Obama coordinated. We now have the tweets, the text messages between Strzok and Page and others that are coming out where they say literally that the White House was coordinating it. So it isn't really quite spies, but the second that he became the president, the fact that Stephen Halper was still working on it, Christopher Steele, the fact that Daniel Jones was taking money from Oleg Deripaski, George Soros, and others, those were all spies. And those are very serious spies. And now the people who are hiding these things are, in fact, part of a conspiracy to hide the work of these spies, either going after a sitting president or these people trying to meddle in the election. But either way, if they came from outside of this country, which many of them were, from Ukraine, from Russia, from Britain, a lot from Britain, they're all spies. And they are all, in fact, attacking the United States government, the Constitution, and the election. So Trump is right, and he's not going to let up on this. Spygate has to be addressed over and over and over again because people will forget it. Now, the other point, from a very early date, every day the news is pointing out that Stephen Halper and that Joseph Mifsud and others were already trying to set up, trying to frame George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Manafort, Cohen, and others. So it was early on. We tell you that it was from January. It was actually planned in December of 2015, started in January of 2016. Eventually, it'll go back to that date. We have a date back now to April.
So planned long before the elections.
Back to April. And when they say that, it was only after the
Well-
Democratic National Committee server hacking that they got involved in July. That is a lie, and we pointed that out again
If you
and again.
want to overthrow the government, you don't just do it on a whim and a fancy. You actually put a plan together. That's the plan that they trusted. Now, I do want to say one thing before you move on to the next tweet about this justice, calling them the Justice Department. Just remind our listeners now, you've got over there 500 SES attorneys at this Department of Justice, and they are there to give cover to all these SES troops. There's no other way to say it. They're bureaucrats, they're troops. They've infiltrated our government. And I'm going to say, I think he needs to totally close down the Department of Justice, and however Congress has to get involved, because he is the executive. This is part of the executive branch. The thing is so corrupt, he just needs to close it down, get every employee out there, fumigate the place, let the rats run, and then he can open up, put a new sign on the building, and call it the Department of Real Justice, and then start all over again and hiring honest, good people that want law and order in America.
Well, the FBI, that'd be the fake Bureau of Investigation, and Justice Department, that's the fake justice. We've been calling it fake justice, like fake news, for some time now. And so what he's pointing out here is that the levels of crookedness, he is saying right in this, you cannot have the Inspector General investigate this. It says, the highest levels of the FBI and justice. Why didn't they contact me to tell me of the phony Russian problem? So in other words, they did nothing about the phony Russian problem except to do a number of studies that said that Russia Today and Sputnik were the big Russian interference. The rest of it is all nonsense. So why didn't they tell him about the fact that they had been had an open investigation on Manafort for years, 4 different agencies? Why didn't they tell him the truth about Felix Sater? Why did they tell him the truth about Carter Page, that he was an FBI asset? Why didn't they tell them about all these things? So it shows that they were crooked from the beginning, from the get-go, from January 1st of 2016. The FBI, the Justice Department, the CIA, and Clapper, and the White House all in on this.
Well, when you're committing a crime, which these people were doing, you don't tell the victim, I'm committing the crime. Of course they're not going to go in and tell Trump about this Russia problem that they now say they have. It wasn't a problem to them. They were overthrowing the government.
They were doing nothing about it, so it couldn't have been too big of a problem. All they were doing is trying to trump up some kind of nonsense to knock Trump out of the election and then knock him out of the presidential seat.
Ready for the next tweet? Okay. This whole Russia probe is rigged. Just an excuse as to why the Dems and Crooked Hillary lost the election in states that haven't been lost in decades. 13 angry Democrats. And by the way, in this whole set of tweets, he says 13 angry Democrats 3 times. So we got to pay attention to that, Thomas. And all Dems, if you include the people who worked for Obama for 8 years. Hashtag Spygate and conflicts of interest. That's in caps with an exclamation point.
You see, from the beginning, the people, the 13 angry Democrats are the people that came with the Mueller investigation. I think 7 to 8 of them came out of WilmerHale. One of them was his previous chief of staff when he was worked for the government, and he was the head of the FBI. So if you look at Andrew Weissman, if you look at Pred Bahara, if you look at the connection with Eric Schneiderman, you look at all these different crooked connections with crooked lawyers. They've shown that 13, I think, of the 18 gave to Democrats, some of them the maximum amount you can give. 2 of them worked under the Obama administration for 8 years, and the others, though they may look like they were Republicans, they actually worked for Obama, so that's what he's trying to say here is this is a Democratic attempt to knock out a Republican president, and as we come to the election, he keeps focusing on these Democrats. He needs to bring this to everybody's attention, that the Dems are as crooked as anybody can possibly be in this. They're hiding it. This is now a cover-up. Adam Schiff and the whole Pelosi and Schumer. He hammers on Schumer here in a minute, and he was hammering on Schumer the other day because they just simply lie. They just simply make up nonsense, which is the opposite of what is happening, and they cannot be trusted. So the conflict of interest come in the fact that WilmerHale is the lawyer agency that represents Manafort. So right there's a conflict of interest. How can Mueller be investigating Comey, one of his best friends? Same thing with Rosenstein and Comey and Mueller. They're best of friends. They've been friends back to the early 90s. So the conflict of interests are so thick we can't even go into all of them. But all these people, for instance, their connections with Uranium One, the fact that their connections to Hillary, the fact that Rod Rosenstein's wife represented the Clintons again and again, and all these people are connected to Hillary Clinton. How could they possibly be running a real investigation into Russian collusion when they never once looked in the direction of the Democrats? That's what he's trying to point out, is that from the get-go, it was completely rigged. It's never looked in the right direction. It was simply a smokescreen.
You know, that article that we posted a while back on Rod Rosenstein's wife, Lisa Barsumian, I don't know how to pronounce her last name because it's not sitting in front of me. You know, that's been our biggest trending article for a long time. So folks are very interested in that. Should we go to the next tweet? You ready?
Sure.
Okay. When will the 13 angry Democrats and those who worked for President O reveal their disqualifying conflicts of interest? It's been a long time now! ! Will they be indelibly written into the report? And that's a capital R, so we need to talk about what that report is. Along with the fact that the only collusion is with the Dems, Justice, FBI, and Russia. You know, I'd add the Brits in there too, President Trump, because we have found a lot of evidence that shows that the Brits are very much behind this, interference in our election system.
Completely. The report is a report that's going to be written by Mueller when it's all said and done. After the indictments and so on and so forth, then there will be a report. And basically that's all it can be, because there was no crime stated in the intent of the special investigation. So since there was no crime stated, nothing can ever come from it. So anything that comes from it is an ancillary indictment that arose, yes, because of the broadened language, but because that broadened language is then broadened a second time simply verbally, the whole thing is a complete, it's disqualified itself. It doesn't fall within the parameters of a special counsel. And every single day that Mueller goes before a new judge, there's more conflicts of interest. Because Peter Strzok is a person, for instance, Stefan Halper, we now find out, was not only a spy, informant, a framer, whatever you want to call him, he was also questioned by the Mueller investigation and was, in fact, a witness. So the very spy who tried to frame these people was the witness. The very person, and now we have two FBI agents who were with Strzok at the time that he interviewed Flynn that are going to turn against him and testify against him. We have William Priestap, who's being called to Congress, as well as two other people very high up in the DOJ and FBI for national security and counterintelligence. They're being called. It's not going to stop. It's just going to keep rolling out. So when Mueller's report finally comes, it has already been said by Rosenstein, there is no collusion and there is no Russian connection between the Trump team and Russia.
Well, the reason that I asked you to make sure that we knew which report, because, you know, a lot of people are talking right now about the knight in shining white armor who is going to ride out from the Department of Justice and make everything better. And that would be Michael Horowitz, because he has a report coming too. What about that report?
Well, that report has only named one person, and the minute they find someone who's committed a crime, they are supposed to report it, and then they get indicted. So nobody's even been indicted. Andrew McCabe may have been fired, supposedly, but we'll have to wait and see whether he is actually indicted and convicted of leaking. Okay, the leaks were everywhere. There's 4 separate investigations for leaks. We've seen thousands of leaks. They only find one? That shows you how hard Michael Horowitz is working. Michael Horowitz's report may point at a lot of things, but convictions, no. Because Huber would have already brought those people's names before Sessions for a conviction or for an indictment if anybody was going down. There will be a lot of things pointed out, just like the Strzok and Page texts. And by the way, they're now being demanded by the Congress to be redacted, those texts, and when they are, it will show us everything. because those were the two closest working with all of these operations, from the Hillary email, 33,000 missing emails, as well as exonerating her and and Weiner's laptop, and the Trump operation. It's those. When you get Strzok actually went over and interviewed Stephen Halper to see if he was able to frame George Papadopoulos, and when he couldn't, he came back and said, well, we'll frame him anyway.
I want proof that these two were having some kind of sexual affair or something, because there have not been any texts that even look to me like the two of them were having an affair. And what, you think there were? I don't see them, because I'll tell you what, those texts, they should be all released, all unredacted. We should know what those two are talking about and what they were planning.
Those 55,000 texts are being redacted. All attachments are taken off of them. All personal remarks have been removed, according to Stephen Boyd, who wrote the letter back to the Congress saying, no, we're not going to unredact them. We're going to remove any names of any SES employees and anybody else we want to redact the name on, and we're removing all personal remarks. Now, mind you, they went to the trouble to make sure that these accounts weren't normal accounts for the FBI. So from the get-go, they tried to hide these. And then they tried to hide them, then they lost them, and then they were found by Horowitz, and then now they're redacted to the point that you can't get much out of them. But even what we get out of it is enough to say that Obama was directing this operation against Trump, both during the election and from the time he was president-elect right up to the inauguration, and even afterwards. We even still hear, words of Eric Holder, who says, who was the spokesperson basically for Obama, everyone in the FBI, resist Trump right now. Break the law, resist what your boss tells you.
But he's given those commands to the senior executive service employees and the civil servants who are still very loyal to the Obama regime.
Yes. And so we've said from the beginning that the recusals that needed to happen, it wasn't Jeff Sessions, though he should, because he was involved in Uranium One. Should have been Rod Rosenstein because of his wife and because of his collusion with the Russians in Uranium One. It should have been Mueller, who should have never entered into it. It should have just been put Comey in jail for leaking and try him for that alone. But no, we're going to play this game like a special counsel is greater than the entire Department of Justice or the president himself, which is a joke. Even the special counsel works for the president. He can fire them. The president is the chief lawmaker of this country when he is the president. He's also the commander-in-chief of the entire military. So that's 4.5 million people he's in charge of, okay? They want to act like he's not in charge of anyone and that they can resist his orders. Well, that's just criminal.
Well, they're counting on Americans not being awake to what's going on and that the Americans will push back on Trump. But this is not the case. Trump's numbers keep improving. The poll numbers keep improving. In fact, one poll recently where we saw what was a 6 to 10 point jump, that even took us by surprise, didn't it?
It was amazing.
It's maybe the pollsters are figuring out that maybe they need to be more honest in their poll taking.
6 to 7 points in 10 days and 12 points in a few weeks. Mm-hmm. It was what? Why? Because the truth is coming out. We told you the tide has turned, and we are seeing that the fight from the Republicans is now being taken up.
No, and I wouldn't say the Republicans, because you've got a lot of Republicans still left in Congress and Senate that are obstructionists, and they still are working with the globalists. So people out there, don't be fooled by this title, Democrats and Republicans. It's really about the globalists who want to eat us up and those of us who want to keep our borders safe and want a sovereign nation.
There's about 30 Congress people who put forward a bill to have a special counsel appointed to investigate the special counsel. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Goodlate and Grassley and Nunes and others who are not letting up with their job because why? The elections are coming up, and every time they bring one of these things to the public's attention and it could actually get to the mainstream media, it wins over more voters to the Republicans because the corruption of the Democrats is becoming so plain. And the collusion between as he says, the Dems, the Justice Department, the FBI, and the Russians. Oh, yeah, the Russians were in on supporting them through Ukraine, a lot of Russians. They worked with Natalia Veselnitskaya. They brought over one of the biggest Russian spies and a group of spies with her. They let them into this country just to try to set up Donald Trump Jr. It is absurd, the collusion, the corruption, and there's no recusal from these people who are then acting as if they have some type of impeccable integrity when in fact they don't.
The next tweet, welcome home, Josh. And there was a little video clip there of, it looks like they were in the Oval Office and lots of hugs and kisses and another hostage home.
Trump's brought home a bunch of them. He's going to bring home more. That's what a president's supposed to do. Maduro, getting him to agree to anything, that is unbelievable. That shows the power of the Trump. And it shows the power that is standing behind him. You know, he's standing for all of America. He's not just standing for himself. So when he does these things, he's working with the power of we the people. And that shows what can happen. Even this disaster going on in Venezuela can be set aside for a moment so something humane can happen, because it was a setup. The guy wasn't a spy. He was certainly not espionage. Those weren't his guns. And he was a Mormon missionary down there trying to get his wife to come back, marry her, and bring her back to America, and he gets thrown in jail. So it just shows again, we have a real president now, not one who every single day of his office bombed and killed people and then had these lovely little, smiling PR moments on the mainstream media showing that we have this great president. No, we had a murderous president who was completely unchecked, and almost every single thing that the Obama administration did is now being undone. Okay, so that sums up the last 4 tweets for May 26th, and then we see at 7 o'clock this morning, 7:41, he starts again. Here we've got 3 more tweets. Who's going to give back the young and beautiful lives and others that have been devastated and destroyed by the phony Russia collusion witch hunt? They journeyed down to Washington, D.C. with stars in their eyes and wanting to help our nation. They went back home in tatters. I believe he's talking about Seth Rich's murder, Sean Lucas' murder, the person who delivered the subpoena for the case against the Democratic National Committee, which is still going on through Debbie Wasserman et al. We're talking about the starry-eyed ones who came to support his campaign, who were then beat up, like some of his own staffers, who now have had to spend more money for legal defense costs for just going before Mueller's investigation, $125,000. It's bankrupted a number of them. And so also the supporters of Trump.
Not to mention his family.
And his family and everyone that they're trying to destroy. So if you're a Republican, it's okay. You're a target. You think that you are going to, be an idealist like the Obamaites were. Nobody bothered the Obamaites for 8 years. But Trump, no. They set him on fire. They try to kill him. They punch him out. You wear a MAGA hat just a year ago, and your life could be on the line. But now, what's happening? The tables are turned, and all these evil people and their evil deeds are coming to light. And so someday we'll know who killed Seth Rich.
And Sean Lucas.
And Sean Lucas. And we're going to find out that it is closer to home than anyone wants to imagine. The Russian fake nonsense with the Democratic National Committee, complete nonsense. We'll talk about that in a minute. But there wasn't a Russian hacking of the Democratic National Committee. We've proven that over and over.
And our hope is that patriots around the world will stand with us, stand strong, and let's be resolved that we will not give up the fight until all of them are put away.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now the next one is fantastic to have 400,000 great men and women of Rolling Thunder in D.C. showing their patriotism. They love our country. They love our flag. They stand for our national anthem. Thanks to the executive director, Artie Mueller.
Of course, the Rolling Thunder is the bikers who come in. Now, remember, they came in for Trump in Chicago. They came in for Trump again and again. If he needed protection during the election, they rolled in. When he needed protection with the threat of the riots that were going to happen after the inaugural event, a lot of those people, they're in jail for 10 years now. But there were many of these Rolling Thunder supporters who came in and were there. We have an army of supporters who will come out for Trump. Tell me any other president that has ever been able to mobilize 400,000 people for patriotism to support POWs and missing in action soldiers, because he's one of the first presidents who have actually supported the military instead of decimating it like Obama did. Obama destroyed the lives of many generals, many high-placed officers, admirals, you name it. He destroyed their lives. He completely got rid of more of our top brass than ever happened in U.S. history. He decimated the military. He used up our supplies, and now they're having to actually build weapons because we are depleted, because Obama had depleted them. 26,000 bombs he dropped in his 8 years.
That was part of the gutting of America, because if our defense is weak and our borders are porous, then the globalists can just run right over us. I'm telling you, if Hillary had been in office, we would not have a country.
And you can hold the pussy hats up to the rolling thunder, and you can ask yourself, who do you think is really going to come to the defense of the president? The resistance? Where is the resistance? Where's Antifa? Where's Black Lives Matter? They're
defunded.
184 non-governmental organizations funded by George Soros. Where are they now? Where are the 22,000 foot soldiers for Obama and OTA? Where's the resistance, Eric Holder? Where's the resistance, Loretta Lynch? Where's the resistance, Al Sharpton, that told everyone to get out and burn our cities summer after summer? He was the race relations person for Obama, who again and again called for the burning of American cities.
Well, he's a race agitator, and he profits from it.
But the point is I'd rather have 400,000 Rolling Thunder motorcycles come out as patriots than all that I've seen from the left-wing, radical, senseless. I'd have to say Obama-inspired and democratically supported and Soros-supported groups.
But the best thing is when those motorcycles, 400,000, I don't know if that's 400,000 bikes or people, but whatever, that much noise, I hope Mueller and his 13 angry Democrats were listening, because those bikes are coming for you guys. All right, next one. Why didn't the 13 angry Democrats investigate the campaign of crooked Hillary Clinton? Many crimes, much collusion with Russia. Why didn't the FBI take the server from the DNC? Rigged investigation. Ooh, that's a powerful punch right there. I'm telling you, POTUS is coming out swinging like I've never seen before on Twitter. I love that we're able to do these recaps and decodes.
And that what he's saying also, between the lines, we can point out. So those 13 angry Democrats, of course, the Mueller investigation, they did not investigate Hillary because they didn't even look at the Democratic National Committee server. They didn't even look at the breach. They didn't look into the death of Seth Rich. They didn't look into the case against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. They didn't listen to Donna Brazil. They didn't listen to anybody. The only thing they did is try to trump up a case against Trump. And it was pathetic. It's the most pathetic thing. One of the most pathetic things I've ever seen that passed for anything legal. I don't know. Legal can get pretty pathetic, but still.
These 13 angry Democrats, it sounds like we need to make a list so that everybody knows their names. And perhaps we even need to show where they came from. If they're from WilmerHale, where they're from. We need to know about these 13 angry Democrats. Let's put that on our to-do list, Thomas.
Yes, well, there's been many articles written about their, that they donated this and they donated that, and how they're all compromised and why they should have recused themselves and why it's.
Well, we need a little rules for radical play here. You know how Saul Alinsky taught his team how to, isolate them and marginalize them and make it personal. Maybe it's time that we all make this personal for these Democrats that stand in the way.
Whoever went after Eric Schneiderman is going to go after Andrew Weissman.
Okay.
Preet Bharara, Loretta Lynch, Eric Holder. They're all the same gang. And so when you talk about the 13 angry Democrats, they are protecting the corrupt Department of Justice system, and particularly the New York Southern and Eastern districts, the Attorney General and the Attorney General of New York, because that's where so much of the corruption goes on. Let's go back to this. Why didn't the Mueller investigation look at Hillary's crimes? What were Hillary's crimes? They completely rigged the primary. They stole money from the other candidates, shuffled it to her. Uranium One was a crime. Hiding it was a crime. Working with Alexander Chalupa and Ukraine against Manafort was a crime. Working with Steele, Christopher Steele, creating the dossier, that was a crime. Creating a fake dossier with Sidney Blumenthal and Sidney Cody Shearer, that was a crime. Working with Fusion GPS and taking campaign money, $12 million, sending it through Perkins Coie and having them pay Fusion GPS, trying to hide it, that's a crime. Those are just a few of the crimes. The crimes of Podesta, Jewel Energy, the money he took from the Russians, his collusion with his brother. 114 times he entered the Obama White House, and they worked together to bring Russian influence, Ukrainian influence into the White House. And John Podesta benefited from that. As I said, he never, ever, ever separated himself from that company. That's a lie. And they never even filed as foreign agents. So he was a foreign agent for the Russians and the Ukrainians while he was in the White House as top aide. And his brother was allowed to come in and do it over and over and over again. So these are some of the crimes. The collusion with the Russians, well, that's because Alexander Chalupa worked with the Russians. Natalia Veselnitskaya worked with the Russians. Oleg Deripaski, a friend of Putin, who gave the money to Daniel Jones to continue the Fusion GPS research with Christopher Steele, those are Russians. So the Russian collusion goes on. The guy who wrote the template for winning the election that was used by Hillary Clinton, and before that, Barack Obama, which was donated by Eric Schmidt and also was put out through Facebook and Google. These are the Russian collusions. But the real Russian collusion is Dmitry Alperovitch.
Good. I'm glad you're going there.
And his dad, Michael.
Yes.
You just posted an article on Truth News Headlines about them, and they called them Daddy Bear and Baby Bear. And the reason is Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear are nonsense. Those are old Russian footprints that Dmitry Alperovitch, who's on the Atlantic Council and a friend of Alexander Chalupa, was called in to the DNC in December, after December 15th, because they had two breaches. And they knew what was taken, which was Podesta's emails and a lot of the back and forth between Podesta and the DNC, and some of Hillary's stuff and a lot of the DNC stuff. So they knew this has happened, so they called in Dmitry. Dmitry left the footprints of the Russians. He also put in his proprietary program called Falcon. He then also went to the Democratic, what do they call it? The Democratic Caucus, the Democratic Congressional Caucus, and Nancy Pelosi said that they should allow Dmitry Alperovitch to put Falcon in the computers, laptops, Blackberries of 40 congressional representatives in the DCCC. So Dmitry still, if there is a DNC server, which I doubt there is anymore, he still has access to it. He still has access to all these accounts. That's what this article said.
Yeah, they're not. No. Let's go back to the DNC server. I doubt that, because inside of there are their lists of donors and people that they can extract money from. They're not going to get rid of those lists. So there's important stuff in there. So somewhere, portions of, shadows of that server exists.
Somewhere, yes, but not in the old server, because they knew it was compromised a long time ago. And they left those footprints, they say, but only Dmitry ever looked at the computer. So the entire Russian hacking nonsense was based upon a ex-Russian who had already been arrested by the FBI, had been imprisoned, and then brought out and turned into an agent for the FBI for years and ended up in McAfee. And McAfee, John McAfee, before that it was two other companies which were basically, those were FBI, counterintelligence, and CIA. Everybody knows that. John McAfee will tell you that. Anybody should know that anyone who worked for them ever is corrupt. So Dmitry Alperovitch joined with one of the top cyber warfare people in the FBI, counterintelligence. That was Sean Henry. They started CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike was then the number one cyber warfare experts used by Obama for the last 5 years of his administration. And it's a lie. They're all lies. And his father holds the crypto keys for not only the Department of Defense, satellites, corporations, but just about anybody you can name. So we have two of the biggest Russian spies still active and working. Right now, CrowdStrike is going to be used as the truth ministry in Europe for the next elections.
It's the Atlantic Council.
But he is, the Atlantic Council and CrowdStrike are the new truth ministry in Europe. So anything that's going to be up on Google, Facebook, or anything in any social media, Dmitry Alperovich, the liar, the criminal, the
Who
Russian
should be
spy,
behind bars.
who absolutely should be behind bars
With his father,
Michael,
never allowed in this country, virtually, digitally, or physically,
is raised up to higher positions. Why? Because $100 million investment from Google.
Yeah.
How about an investment from Tim Geithner?
Yes, Tim Geithner. We've been watching you, Tim.
And his little group. And so what's happening is the people get behind these groups. They know they're going to be the only ones used by the government. They know they're crooked. They leave the footprints, just like Vault 7 said, of anybody that they want to attribute the hack to. And Dmitry Alperovich has been found both in the Ukrainian artillery scandal to be a liar, to be using old stuff that not even Google will use. Nobody will use this stuff. It's old. It's garbage. And he stole it to begin with. And so Sean Henry and Dmitry Alperovich are really the ones who went in and left the Russian footprints in the Democratic National Committee server.
But we all have to be careful as seekers of truth that we don't wind up going down one path solely and only look. Because it seems to me that we're being driven down this Russia path. And we need to stop and think. Christopher Steele is English. He is from the United Kingdom. And what path are we finding of the corruption that exists in Britain as it applies to America?
It is so thick, it's unbelievable. As we pointed out...
But nobody, wait a minute, let me just say this, because nobody wants to go there because we have been brainwashed for a zillion years that the Brits and the Americans, we are such good friends. So we don't even dare go down that path.
And that is a lie. We have now found out that the Brits are one of our biggest enemies. It took a long time. It took a lot of research, and it took literally, I don't know how many scores of people to discover this, but soon we're going to give another crowning piece to the article to finish off the month of Serco awareness and preceding and following the month of SES awareness, because we have found the machinations, we've found the mechanisms, we've found the way that this works, and it goes back to old systems. But when it comes down to spying on America and spying on the election, they say Trump spied with Cambridge Analytica. No, go back to the mother company. That's SCL.
Strategic Communications Laboratories.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Group. And they are now bankrupt. Why?
Because they want to hide their crimes?
Because they have been involved in 100 elections in 60 different countries, 44 elections in America. They tried to rig all of them with fraud, with extortion, and with sexual scandals, which are fake. This has been discovered in England, and they closed them down. They closed down both of the American companies here, Cambridge Analytica and SCL Group USA. So these are the spies. And who is it who worked for them and was associated through Cambridge intelligence seminars and Hackluit and Orbis International, which is Steele's group? Oh, that would be the very people in SCL who are all ruled by one guy, Sir Geoffrey Patty, who holds the golden shares for the Queen, not only in intelligence and in the Treasury and in trade and in weapons and in uranium, but in her companies. And they have the SCL group, the mother company of Cambridge Analytica, was basically the intelligence for the corporate rulers of Britain, which are the ones still trying to rule us. So we went back and found out who that was. That's Sir Richard Dearlove, who was who was telling Christopher Steele exactly what to do. Is it Anthony or Andrew Wood? They're all British.
It's a whole network of Brits. They have their own spying group. The Privy Council is there. They're directing all of this. Some people say to us, well, the Queen is good and she's lovely. Well, I'm sorry, but we weren't brainwashed the way you were about the Queen. So we can look at it maybe a little bit more objectively, just like you can look at our country's mess a little bit more objectively than we can. And we see all roads go to Queen Elizabeth. Now, that's not saying that there aren't other trails that we are working, because we see the trail of human trafficking with the Vatican, and we've already called that out, and we're going to continue on there. And of course, there are other factions that we will get, but we can't get everything in one audio.
There are so many corrupt people involved in SCL, let's just name some of them. Sir James Allen Mitchell, who was the Queen's Privy Councillor. Rear Admiral John Tolhurst, who was the aide-de-camp to the Queen, who was a member of Parliament and the Defense Minister. We have Sir Richard Dearlove. He was the head of MI6. He's Christopher Steele's mentor. We have Andrew Wood, the British ambassador to Russia. He was Christopher Steele's mentor. We have Robert Hannigan, the head of the GCHQ, which is basically the NSA for the Brits. He came over and worked directly with John Brennan at Fort Meade, Maryland, to spy on the Trump campaign. This is now a fact. Admiral Rogers turned them all in. So on and on, I can go on and on and on with Jonathan Clark and Alexander Downer, and they're all connected to Hacklewitt, and they're connected to Stephen Halper. They're all connected, the British intelligence seminars. It is so thick that these guys had to close their most powerful intelligence agency in Britain because of it, because they had been caught red-handed, not only influencing our election and trying to unseat Trump even after he was elected, but for the 100 other times they did it in 60 other countries where they brag about it. They call it, they can go in and they can do what they call mass deception behavior research, which causes behavioral changes through behavioral change programs. And they literally call it counter-propaganda. These dirty dogs, Nigel Oakes, Alexander Nix, the ones who invented Behavioral Dynamics Institute, which was the mother company, they're all gone down. Now, we just have to watch because they are run by Tarrington Management, which is ran by, of course, as I mentioned, Sir Geoffrey Patty, and just other ones like the Eden Intelligence Group. Gavin McNichol, he's in also the SCL. So we are talking about the most powerful people in Britain just got taken down. So this whole spy thing and Spygate, when Trump said it's the biggest thing in U.S. history, correct. Is it the biggest in history? It might be. Because if you look at the ramifications going all the way back to Britain, you will see that the dominoes are falling. And we just hope the dominoes come all the way around to take out these people that we have listed, because these are the people who are following in the footsteps of the way the Brits have shown them how to do it. And since the Brits have faltered because they ran up against the Trump effect, we hope that Mueller, Comey, his whole gang, the FBI, CIA, the whole gang of them that was working to unseat a duly elected president as well as meddle in the election will also fall, just like those dominoes have fallen in Britain.